the Happy Scientist podcast. Each episode is designed to make you more focused, more productive, and more satisfied in the lab. You can find us online at bitesizebio.com/happyscientist. Your hosts are Kenneth Vogt, founder of the executive coaching firm Vera Claritas, and Dr. Nick Oswald, PhD, bioscientist, and founder of Bitesize Bio.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Happy Scientist podcast. This is the place to be if you want to become a happier, healthier and more productive scientist. I am Nick Oswald, the founder of Bitesize Bio, and today we will be drawing on the wisdom of Mr. Kenneth Vogt, the Bitesize Bio team coach and founder of the executive mentoring company Vera Claritas. Today, and in all other Happy Scientist podcast episodes, you get to benefit from his Yoda-like words of wisdom to help you increase your performance, enjoyment, and success in the lab. In this episode, we'll be discussing a topic that many of us will deal with, or at least think we will deal with, at least one point in our lives, and that is burnout. Okay, Ken, let's talk about how to deal with burnout.
All right, let's do that. It's a topic that is of grave concern if somebody feels like they're up against it, and I'm gonna refer to my own life right now just to use as an example. We are less than 3 weeks away from the anniversary of my stroke, and I spent 6 weeks in a hospital, and I've spent almost a year doing outpatient physical therapy. If anybody should be burned out right now, it's me. Except I'm not. I'm not burned out. Now, I'm surrounded by people that tell me how hard they're having it and how burned out they are. And it got me thinking, I wonder how many times it is that people aren't actually really burned out. What they are is they're just tired. And so the question would be then, well, how do you tell the difference? Well, I can tell you what's been working for me. If I'm feeling like I'm burned out, if I take a break and I feel better, I'm not. If I can get some rest or take a nap, if I can have some kind of change of pace, whether that's sit down and watch the game, or maybe, get out of the house, and it stops, I know I'm not burned out. But if you find that you're taking steps like that and it's not helping, that's a different story. Now we're talking about actual burnout. Now, I don't want to take away from those of you that aren't having, according to Hoyle, burnout. Because if you're feeling stressed that way, you do need to deal with it. And it is a good thing for you to take a break or to get some rest or to make some change. By all means, feel free to do that. But if you've been taking steps like that and it's not working and you're getting scared, and you're starting to think, I don't know what I'm going to do here because I've done everything that people say you should do, and it's not changing anything. Then we can look a little deeper. Now, some other signs that you might be burned out is a sense of prolonged stress, like stress that's been there so long you're not even sure where it started, but it's ever present. It won't ever go away. And sometimes it gets worse than other times, but the baseline is always there. Now, that could be a sign of burnout. or even find you're being overwhelmed by things, and often about things that to your mind shouldn't be overwhelming. Why am I overwhelmed at this toddler right now? Why am I overwhelmed by what is a normal workload in the lab? Why am I overwhelmed by having to deal with the same colleagues I've always had to deal with? Being consistently overwhelmed can be a sign of burnout also. Now, if you find yourself just unable to meet the demands of your normal daily routine, things you used to be able to do, but now you just can't, or maybe it's not even a matter of it's used to, maybe things have changed, but it's what should be an acceptable level of requirements of you, and you see other people around you able to manage it, but you can't. Well, again, that can be a sign of burnout. Another thing you may encounter is that whatever is on your plate, you just don't feel like it. You just got no motivation about anything. You don't want to bother to eat well. You don't want to bother to go to the gym. You don't want to bother to go into work. You don't want to finish that report. You don't want to write that study. You don't want to do that experiment. You don't want to do anything. Okay, well, that kind of lack of motivation, especially if that's a change, can be a sign of burnout. If you find you're not interested in your surroundings, things that used to excite you, things that you used to find energizing or beautiful or enjoyable to be around, you just don't care anymore. You don't care if things are neat and tidy around your workspace. You don't care that things are in good working order. You don't care that things are clean. You don't care that things are safe. Again, these can be signs of burnout. Another thing you can look at is just yourself. Are you neglecting yourself? Are you not bothering to get a decent amount of sleep? Are you just staying up watching YouTube videos for no reason whatsoever, and at a time when you really should be in bed? Are you finding that I'm not going to bother? You just don't want to bother to comb your hair or brush your teeth, or you don't want to bother going to the hairstylist or whatever routines that you're typically used to, or you're to a point where maybe even people are noticing and saying, maybe you should pay a little more attention. You got 2 buttons unbuttoned on your shirt. What's up with that? Or they're like, I hate to tell you, but your breath's kind of bad these days. Or like, you got to wash your hair every once in a while, or whatever it might be. Are you just not taking care of this wonderful vehicle that you're walking around in, your body? And finally, what kind of emotions are you having? Are you experiencing anxiety to a level that it's really getting in the way? But maybe it's not even that. Maybe you're just being cynical about everything. You just think everything's gonna go bad. Every possible negative thing is likely to happen. And I hadn't even thought of all the negative things that could happen yet, but I'm going to put some time into that and work on it. Or are you feeling hopeless? Feel like I'm not even going to bother thinking about it. It's the whole world's going to blow up. That's just the way it is, and there's nothing I can do. Are you having those kind of emotional reactions to things? Again, these are all these things could be signs of burnout. Now, some of you out there are going to recognize this list and go, okay, individually, those things have happened to me in my life here and there. And we've all had that happen. We've all been stressed sometimes, or overwhelmed, or stopped paying attention to ourselves, or lacked motivation. But in other cases, if you're finding that, some of these symptoms look so familiar, I can't remember not being without them, or I'm having so many of these symptoms at once that this is a change. I haven't had this before. Or worse yet, this is how it's always been for me. So if you've made it all the way to being a PhD scientist in a lab, and you've been burned out the whole time, wow, you need to write a book and tell people how you survived it. The chances are this hasn't been your normal course all the time. So if it does pop up, it can be pretty disturbing, because it's not normal. It's not a place you should stay, and it's not a place you need to stay. There's no requirement to your job or your career that burnout should be a normal part of it. It doesn't have to be that way. Now, another thing is the kind of the labels that we use to describe burnout, because some people they don't want to admit they're burned out, and so they try to label it in such a way that, well, that doesn't apply to me. Because the only thing I'm feeling is physical, but I'm emotionally, mentally, I'm fine. Or the only thing I'm feeling is emotional. It's just emotion. Don't worry about that. Who cares? Or it's just mental stuff. I'll get over it. It can happen in all those areas, and it can show up in different ways. And again, this is a way of recognizing that something's going on, that you've got some of the symptoms here. And I want to take one aside here and comment too that, look, I'm not speaking as a psychologist. I'm not speaking as a counselor. If you really feel like you need some support in that way, by all means, get some professional help. Now, and if you're not comfortable with professional help, perhaps you will be comfortable. Maybe you've got a mentor in your life. Maybe you've got a trusted associate that you can lean on. By all means, reach out to somebody. Don't try and do it alone. We humans are social creatures, and we all need support sometimes. So back to how one might experience this burnout. Physically, it could show up as tiredness, and especially tiredness that doesn't make sense to you. It's like, I understand I'm tired after I just cleaned out the garage, for 6 hours, but it's like, I'm tired and I didn't even do anything. Okay, that may be a sign. Or you've got, aches in your body that again, don't have an organic source. Or you're having headaches. I hate to say that headaches aren't normal, because I don't want anybody who has headaches to feel like, how dare you say such a thing. But we don't have to have headaches. If we're having headaches, something's up. So, again, all of these things can be signs of burnout. And that's a physical sign. Or perhaps what's happening in your case, so you're finding that emotions are arising that are getting in your way, and you don't find to be helpful or positive. Like, you're angry all the time, and you get angry about things that don't make sense to get angry about, or you get angry in settings where it's not professional to be angry. So that might be a signal. Or you're apathetic. You just don't care. And I promise you, if you got to the point that you are in your life where you are a full-time scientist and a highly educated one, there's no way you've been apathetic all your life. Not possible. So if that's happening, that's a sign something's up. You may be facing distress. Things are upsetting you or scaring you, and you're like, you don't know if you can deal with it. You can cope with it. You don't know if you can take the pressure. These can be signs of it. Or you're overwhelmed. It's like, there's just too much going on. I could do any one of these 10 things, but I can't do all 10 at once. Might be how your outlook is. So that's in a way that burnout may show up emotionally. And then mentally may be the most scary one for somebody in your field. If you feel like, I can't think. I used to be able to look at something and I just understand it. Now I can't wrap my head around it. Or I can't focus. It's like, okay, I could think about it if I could give it my attention, but I've got so many things distracting me. Or you're becoming forgetful. You're dropping the ball on things you didn't used to drop a ball on. Or finally, you feel like you've lost your imagination. It's like, I just can't come up with anything new anymore. All of that stuff, whether it's physical, emotional, or mental, can all be symptoms that show up about burnout and can give you a clue that something is up. So the first thing I want to say to you is, if you've gone through all this and you have now self-diagnosed, holy cow, I think I'm burned out, don't be afraid. It's not an insurmountable problem. And it's funny because the nature of being burned out makes it feel insurmountable. It's just kind of one of the characteristics. One of the ways you're burned out is because you don't think you can get over being burned out. But that's not true. That is just a subterfuge that it puts up. So there are ways to handle this. Now, I will say, for those of you who have stuck around, even though you're not presently burned out, I want to thank you for doing that. And I want to point out to you something you can do, then you probably are already doing when it comes to burnout, is to get in front of it. The old saying is an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. And it's so true. If you can look for signs that might be leading to burnout, when you start to experience some of the things that we talked about earlier, you start to recognize some of that stuff, and you take steps then to, well, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to do something that will actually help. And for some folks, there are steps you're willing to take, and there are other steps you're just not. I know for some folks, if I suggest the notion of taking a nap, they laugh and just push it away. It's like, oh, yeah, wouldn't that be great? But I'm not 3 anymore. And they just won't consider it. They won't even consider the possibility that they could take a nap. Well, let me tell you something. Especially if you feel that way, you need to take a nap. They're wonderful when it comes to that. And sometimes we feel like we can't take a break because we looked at our schedule and it's too, there's no spot in there to take a break. And I saw this little meme that was floating around the other day that said that everyone should meditate for 20 minutes every day, unless you don't have time, in which case you should meditate for 60 minutes every day. So it's the same kind of thing. You fit things in because they're important. Everything that's on your schedule got there because it was important. And if you start to realize that protecting yourself from getting burned out is important, you will schedule time for this. You'll make room for it. And you start to recognize that this is a matter of taking care of yourself. And at the end of the day, who is responsible for taking care of you? You're an adult now. Mommy's not going to take care of you. It's you. You got to take care of you. And if you're not going to the one to do it, you can't wait around for somebody else to do it. And this romantic notions of my significant other is going to take care of me. Well, that's nice if they do, but you can't count on them to do that. You can't make it their responsibility. Let's put it that way. If they're good enough to do that, if they're that wonderful of a compassionate person, lovely. But you ultimately have to be compassionate to yourself. You've got to take care of you. So now, let's consider some ways that you might take care of you. There are some simple things. And I've already mentioned my favorite, take a nap. But, it doesn't have to be, get in bed and go to sleep. It can be just rest for a minute. Maybe it's just sit down for a minute. It's plop down on the couch. It's get out of the lab and get into the lounge. Maybe it's sit outside on a park bench. Other things you could do is take a walk. You maybe your body needs to be moved. Maybe you've been stuck in one position too long. So, relieve your body that way. And for some folks, just taking a walk is enough. For other people, man, they need to go to the gym. They need to hit the heavy bag. They need to get on the treadmill. They need to get on the Stairmaster. You know yourself and you know your own body. Do the thing that will feel like you've taken care of yourself. Now, if you feel great after getting on a spin bike and pouring it on for 45 minutes and being drenched in sweat, if that's something that gives you a feeling of feeling great afterward, by all means do that. If you're somebody that just needs to take a leisurely walk in the park and notice the birds and the trees, and that makes you feel good, well, by all means do that. Now, I mentioned that meme earlier about meditating, and I realized that the word meditate sets some people off. I want to give those of you that have an aversion to the notion of meditation, like, wow, that sounds all spiritual in air quotes, and I'm a realist. I exist in the real world. Like, all right, fair enough. Let me give you a different word, and I think it's a word you can probably get behind. Take time to contemplate. Contemplation is peer to meditation. And don't let your spiritual friends tell you it isn't. If you could just take some time to think, it can be very valuable. And now that means you have to stop doing some of this stuff. You got to give yourself a chance to be committed to just contemplating. And that contemplation might be focused on something specific, Maybe you want to contemplate how you want to solve a particular problem. Maybe you want to contemplate on a particular area of a new area that's of interest to you that you don't feel you're up to date on. Great, do that. Now, contemplation has had a great place in scientific history. I'm sure you can come up with many stories all the way back to like Pythagoras of moments of contemplation where people had insights. So it's
Eureka moments.
exactly, exactly. Good old eureka. So by all means, contemplate, and by the way, too, you know what? Try out meditation sometime. Give it a shot. It's you may find it can do things for you that contemplation doesn't, or you may find that it's as good as contemplation. It's not as bad as I thought. It's not as woo-woo as I was concerned about. So, again, something to try. Now, another thing you need to think about to take care of yourself is make sure you have proper meals. If you get so busy that you don't take time to stop and eat, and I mean actually have a decent meal. I don't mean take time to run to the vending machine and get some potato chips or a candy bar. And I don't mean, well, all I've got is 10 minutes, so I got to wolf down a Big Mac and fries. I mean an actual decent, nutritious meal, something that you will enjoy, and take time with it. And meals are something that, especially in modern American culture, and I think this may be true in some places, unfortunately, still in Europe, or I say also in Europe, that people don't take time to enjoy their meal and socialize during their meal. Now, granted, there are some places in Europe that are famed for long meals. The Mediterranean area comes to mind especially, but where people are taking an hour and a half or 2 hours to have a meal, and they have it with conversation, and they have it with wine, and the notion of the slow food movement that comes to mind. It's a good idea. But even if you don't go that route, maybe you don't have the opportunity to socialize during a meal. Say it's lunchtime at work, sit down with your meal. Don't eat it at your desk, at your bench. Get out of there. Get into the kitchen, or go outside if that's a possibility, or go someplace where you can dedicate yourself to being at the meal and to give yourself permission to be, okay, I'm doing this now. I'm no longer thinking about what I was doing earlier. I'm no longer doing what I was doing earlier. I'm here to do this thing, which is to have a meal, which is good for my body, gives myself a chance to have a mental rest, and hopefully to have something that you enjoy and is good for your body and nutritious, and that you can take in a positive direction. Now, I realize that there's some food that is not good for you that is very enjoyable. I'm looking at you, chocolate truffles, that are sitting right in front of me. But and it's fine to have some of that in your life, but don't make that the center of everything. Don't make that everything you eat. That's the point. Again, it'll just add to your burnout. Now, another thing to take the nap thing to an extension is to sleep properly. When I say properly, I mean go to bed at a reasonable hour so that you can get up at a reasonable hour, so that you're not rushed in the morning when you get up, because you've slept enough and you haven't overslept because your body is just screaming for more sleep, or you feel like I wasn't even in bed. I don't know why I'm getting up. The issue with sleep is such a problem for people these days, and it's so simple. You used to be a champion at sleep. Every kid they could give us some lessons on how to sleep, especially little kids. Little kids can go to sleep on a moment's notice. It's beautiful. But sleep is such an important part of what we're doing. And if you've been going along, burning the candle at both ends, and you're getting 3 or 4 hours sleep a night, you're not going to last. Now, I realize there are some folks out there that really can have less sleep than others. So I'm not trying to tell anybody what their sleep threshold should be. You have to know it for yourself. But be honest with yourself and don't get stuck on being prideful about it. Like, if you're proud of the fact that you can keep going on 4 hours sleep, that's kind of a sign that something's up. It shouldn't be a matter of pride. It should be a matter of observation. Like, well, this body does fine with 4 hours or 6 hours sleep or 9 hours sleep, whatever it is. But notice where it is and do that. Yeah, and oversleep can be a problem too, because you can get to the point where you don't get anything done because you never get out of bed. And again, that is often a sign of somebody that is having some kind of burnout. So, don't be afraid to take notice of your sleep patterns and act appropriately. And again, if you're finding you can't sleep, maybe you do need to see a doctor about that. Or if you're finding you can't be awake, again, you definitely need to see somebody about that. So check into that. Another thing you can do, and this is a simple thing to do, and you can do it at your bench. I'm going to allow you to do this at the same time you're working, is drink water. Make sure you drink enough water. And I mean water. I don't mean caffeinated beverage. I don't mean sugared beverage. I don't mean aspartamed beverage. I mean water. Drink water.
I'm just gonna put in the public health notice to say don't drink water at the bench. Just put it in your office. There you go. Carry on, Ken.
Okay. Yes, I understand that you're often dealing with liquids there, that you don't want to confuse the wrong one liquid for another, and all of a sudden you have a
no food at the bench. No food and drink at the bench.
Okay. Fair enough. This is why we have Nick on here to check me out here on some of this stuff. My point is that make it readily available to yourself. So, if I don't know what you could describe this to me. What would it be a typical day at the bench, Nick, where you're there and you do not leave that bench for 8 hours straight?
No.
Okay.
No. You would. There are natural breaks that you would be away, and depending on the design of your lab, but generally you have access to some sort of desk that's a place where you can drink water or whatever.
All right, so there you go. So you have the opportunity to just make sure, again, you're just taking care of your body, because again, if you're having physical signs of burnout, it could just be the body's getting stressed. You may be mentally strong and emotionally stable, but your body's getting burned out. Or you may find you're emotionally being worn down, or you may find that mentally you're being beat up. It all depends on your circumstances. So, you can do these things to take care of yourself, and focus on the ones that are physical or emotional or mental as your needs are. And don't excuse yourself, because sometimes it's easy to do certain things. Like, I'm not really physically burned out, but I like to sleep, so I'm going to listen to that. But the real burnout's happening for you mentally. Well, then get engaged in that area, and look at it differently. So, some other things to engage on. So let's talk about that. And this is a big one. Learn to say no, especially if you're finding that you're emotionally burned out or mentally burned out. A lot of times that comes down to it's emotions you could handle, or a mental load you could handle if there wasn't so much of it. It's you got to recognize there's no meaning to saying no. It's just saying that's not possible right now. It's not saying I don't care about you. It's not saying I don't respect you. It's not saying it's not saying that I don't have fellow feeling. All it's saying is that I don't have the capacity right now. And that capacity doesn't represent your goodness or your worth. It's just a reality of what's going on. Now, perhaps in a situation where you have to say no, it requires an explanation. And I say perhaps because it doesn't always. You don't have to give everybody a reason. If every time you talk about, somebody says, hey, can you do X? And your common way to approach it is to say, I can't because, and you always have to have that because, or you can't say no. Well, I'm going to ask you to take because out of your vocabulary for a day and see what you do. You got to learn to deal without it. You don't have to give explanations for everything. Now, I grant you that sometimes your boss requires an explanation, perhaps. You got to do that. Or your lab mate requires an explanation. Or a client or customer requires an explanation. Well, I mean, yeah, you got to respect that. But there are many cases where there's no reason that anybody has to be told why. They don't need to know what else you're doing. And in fact, in some cases, it's none of their business what else you're doing. So you gotta remove yourself from that. And you're gonna find when you get rid of that requirement for because, no becomes a lot easier. Maybe you just have this inkling that I can't do this, and you can't quite put an explanation to it or put it into words. Well, if you're in a situation where you have to give a because in your own mind, you're not going to say no in those situations, even though you've got a hunch, you've got an intuition that you should say no. Well, hunches and intuitions are very, very important in the scientific world, and you got to listen to them. And if you got one that's telling you to say no right now, you got to say it. It's one of the ways that you're gonna avoid burnout, and it's one of the ways that you're going to protect yourself if you're already feeling that. Another thing you can do is to unplug. And when I say unplug, I mean, if you're someone that works all day and then you go home and you read scientific journals and to unwind, you watch Nova on TV, at some point you gotta step out of it all. You got to do something that's just pleasurable. And, if that means watching some sports, or that means listening to a symphony, or that means, going to a concert, or having a beer, or anything that is outside of your normal, this is what a scientist does as a scientist. Give yourself a chance to be more than just a scientist. You are more than just a scientist. And as wonderful as it is to be that, there are other things to be too, and do those things. It's good for you to play Candyland with the kids. It's good for you to take a moment with your significant other to watch the sunset. And it's good for you to open up a novel that you're reading for guilty pleasure. Do those things. They ultimately are going to feed back into giving you a more sound mental state, and you're going to find you're going to be able to think better after that. You're going to find that you're going to be less likely to run off emotionally. There's nothing wrong with being emotional. We're humans. What's the problem is when emotions take over, and when they run amok. If you have where you just can't even control how you feel. Control is not the right word I want to say here. Sometimes we don't control how we feel. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you find that your emotions are constantly running away with you, that can really get in the way. So unplugging can help you get more of a grip on that. Another thing to think about when it comes to burnout, you may realize that, I wouldn't feel burned out if this person and this person and this person weren't in my life. And that might be people you work with. And maybe, I wouldn't feel burned out if it wasn't for this PI who is making my life miserable. Or I wouldn't feel burned out if it wasn't for this person at the next bench who's constantly causing problems in our lab. Or it might be that, if I wasn't constantly getting calls from, my childhood best friend about how much of a wreck his life is, and how much he needs my help, and he needs me to help him move again, and he needs me to come have a beer with him, and he needs me to listen to his problems. You start to realize that there are some people that are costing you. And they might be in your professional life, they might be in your personal life. Now, in your professional life, you can look at that and go, well, is there a way for me to get away from that? And, it might mean making some changes in your work life. Now, sometimes they're radical changes. Maybe you need to quit your job and find a different one. Or maybe it's just, I need to get reassigned, to get away from this person. Take those steps. And you may find that that's enough. That is enough to get you out of the burnout that you're feeling. Now, another thing when it comes to associates, you have some associates around you, there's nothing wrong with them at all. But the problem is that you're constantly comparing yourself to them, and they're so great and they're so wonderful, and I'm such a loser and I can't keep up, and that is creating constant strain for you. Now, you may be fortunate enough to work with some really amazing people, and perhaps you're not their peer. There's no shame in that. You don't have to be the greatest who ever was at everything. And if you happen to have the good fortune of being in the company of some of those people, by all means, be around them, learn from them, gain from their mentorship and their experience, but don't compare yourself to them. Not in such a way that you're going to drag yourself down and where you're trying to keep up with something you just can't keep up with. I remember this is back in grade school, and there was one kid in class. I don't know why. He was bigger than me, quite a bit bigger than me actually, but he could really run long distance. And so in gym class, we were going to run a mile. And I got it in my head, I know how I'm going to run a mile. I'm just going to keep up with Greg. That's going to be it. I'll be able to run. I will run a great mile just keeping up with Greg. Well, that lasted about a tenth of a mile. I couldn't keep up with Greg. He was a good long distance runner already in sixth grade, and I was 6 inches shorter than most of the boys my age. I wasn't going to keep up with anybody. That was going to happen. It didn't matter that I wasn't overweight or anything, but I didn't have that long distance kind of thing. I was not built for that at that time. So, it's the same way with this. When we look at the people around us, don't make comparisons. And some people really are better than us at one thing or another. There's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't make them a better human being. Doesn't mean they're more of a they're more worthy to be alive than you. They're there and they're doing their thing, and they should do their thing. But you should do your thing. And you may be better at other things. Maybe some other things that aren't as economically valued, or maybe not as publicly praised. But do the things that you're good at, and don't put yourself down for the fact that you're not good at certain things. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't make an effort to better yourself and improve in areas where you're weak, and that's fine. But don't beat yourself up about the present state you're in to the point where you're burning out, because that won't help. You're not going to get better at it if you burn out. So you got to get your head in the right space on that. Another thing you can do is you can get yourself some outside interests where you're doing things different than what you do in the lab. Now, maybe what you do in the lab actually is pretty physical and you do a lot of hands-on kind of stuff, but maybe not. Maybe your work is a lot more intellectual in what you do. Well, maybe then it would be good for you to have some kind of physical outside interest, something where you're using your hands, and whether that's putting in a garden or working on your car or something physical in that regard, building a shed in the back, that's great. Use your hands to, again, give yourself just a different kind of outlet. Another thing you can do is use your mind. Now, and I know you're all using your minds for your work, but you're using them in a certain kind of way. Maybe you need to use your mind in a different way to give yourself a bit of a break. And maybe that's, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back and I'm going to reread all of William Shakespeare. That would be a great way to use my mind. Or I'm going to really get into this interesting area that is, outside of my work area. I'm very interested in plant pathology because I like gardening. But I'm not a scientist. So, it's a good thing for me to look at. But that doesn't mean that it wouldn't be a good thing for you to look at. I mean, you're working on animals all day long. Maybe looking at plants would be a good thing for you. Something different to do with your mind. And maybe it's a matter of doing puzzles or reading mysteries and to figure out what's what, especially you can go back to like classic mysteries like, Raymond Chandler, the Noir kind of stuff, again, just some suggestions, just some ideas. And finally, you can use your heart. And it may be that you're not engaged in anything that really involves much compassion or giving as far as work goes. Well, maybe you do want to volunteer somewhere and do something like that. Maybe you want to get more involved in art and music, something where it's more than just imagination now. Now you're seeking beauty and you're looking for something beyond just the technical or ways to check the boxes. Again, anytime you add some of that stuff in, and I know it sounds like when you're burned out, add in, that sounds crazy. Well, no, it's the way to go. Because it may be you're burning out because you're missing something. Not so much because you have too much on your plate, but there's something missing. So, and you're going to know when there's something missing. You're going to know when you feel that, like, man, I wish, there's a lot of folks I've known that they play instruments. They've learned to play piano or guitar or violin or whatever in their past. But you ask them and they tell you that they're not a musician. They don't play anything. When actually they do. Maybe they need to re-engage with it. And it's possible some folks have negative memories, like, I hated piano lessons. Yeah, but you know what? Well, now when you're not being forced to do it, you may find it's a lot different. Like, I found something that happened to me at one point. I'd been so involved in technical work and been so involved in mathematics and computer science that I hadn't really been engaged in English literature. So I went back and I reread Charles Dickens. And all I remembered was I hated Charles Dickens when I was forced to read it. But when I read it when I wanted to, I just thought it was delightful. And after that, I thought, well, I'm going to reread Shakespeare again because maybe I got the wrong path on that too. And I sure did. I had a great time with that. And, so you're going to know what the right thing is for you. So, figure out what it is that you can do that's outside of your scientific interest, and any of that can help you then to deal with any burnout you're facing. So, all these ideas being said, I'll throw it back to you, Nick. Is there anything you'd like to add or any questions you'd like to interpose?
Yeah, I just would like to marry this up with my, what, again, as normal, what I've seen around me or what I've done myself as a scientist. And I think that, what you're kind of talking about is, burnout is, you could kind of summarize it by saying you kind of pull yourself too far in one direction to the point where you snap, if you like. And a lot of that comes from, I think anyway, that we, if you're a researcher in the lab, by definition, you're some level of high achiever. You kind of push yourself. And that can you can take that too far, because you prize the achievement over looking after yourself, or you burn yourself to get the achievement, kind of thing. And actually, and you touched on this, Ken, is that as well, is that kind of that pushing yourself too hard can kind of, in some environments, can become kind of a badge of honor. And I've seen that in science, where it's like, I didn't have time to eat dinner, and I just went and got something from the vending machine, and I've done that every night this week, and so on. And and so I think that these kind of environments, like scientific research being one of them, are ripe for people burning out, and from that perspective. And another thing, other things that feed into that are, the whole badges of honor about, we drink so much coffee to keep us going that caffeine just keeps amping you up, and you don't get enough sleep. Then you're creating cycles for yourself that are unhealthy, and that all feed into each other they create a spiral. I've written here that burnout to me feels like a spiral. I have experienced it myself. It feels like a spiral where everything gets faster and faster and faster. Everything moves in smaller and smaller circles, if you like, like the spiral. And so the further up you get the spiral, you get the harder it is to get out of that pattern, and it tends to intensify. And everyone has a breaking point. And for me, I know mine. I know where, okay, now if I continue this another 2 weeks, I'm going to break. So I need to stop. And but that's only from having done it. It's best to stay away from it if you can. But I think it's the important thing to realize is that you do have a breaking point. You're not superhuman. You can't keep going at this. You can't keep burning the candle at both ends. As well, that's the more a time-based thing. But you can't keep abusing yourself like this and get away with it forever. I've seen a lot of people burn out like that. And then this whole another thing that that adds on to that is you touched on the idea of meditation. Well, I don't do that. I'm a fact-based person. That's fine. Well, why not contemplate then? You're thinking. So why not take it one step back? Why not just give your brain a rest for a while? Right? Give your brain a rest. Give your body some exercise. Give your body some good nutrition. Give your body some sleep, give yourself some space. Those are things that take you back down the spiral, and because they feel like you're slowing down, your high achiever nature doesn't want you to do that. But that slowing down thing, or that reversing the spiral, is what you need to do to be able to balance, pushing on, pushing forward, trying to achieve, and not reaching the burnout point. You've got to give yourself to unwind, is the other phrase, isn't it? But I think that spiral idea is the idea of thinking of it as a spiral really helps me, because it feels like I don't want to slow down. I have things to do. It's like, yeah, but you need to go back to give yourself some space to go forward again, if you like.
So I was thinking there's three states people might find themselves in. Maybe you're relatively young yet you've never burned out, but you're really scared that you will one day. And by the way, you should be scared of that. It's not a good experience. Now, maybe you're somebody that has burned out more than once, but the problem is the pattern keeps showing up again. You can't seem to stop it. Now that ought to be even more scary. But maybe you're somebody, like Nick has described and like I've described. We've both burned out before, and we got through it, and we found out how to deal with it. And it's like I was saying at the beginning of this, I've been through a really terrible personal experience, and it didn't result in burnout because I've got all this other stuff in place. I know how to keep from burning out these days, and it really worked in a really trying situation. So. I can wholeheartely recommend this to anyone.
The interesting thing about your situation, Ken, that it's a physical injury kind of, and it lends itself really well to looking at it as you've had to put in you've had to put in stretches of real exertion to get yourself physically back into operatability, is that the word? Anyway, yeah. So you've had to really, you've had to put in really physical effort to do that, and it's been exhausting and so on. But there's only so much of that your body can take before you literally exhaust the body. So you have to give it a rest, which you've done. You have to feed it properly, which you've done. And again, it comes back to actually that what we're doing as the high achievers, we will be the greatest scientist in the universe by being the one that tries the hardest. What we're doing is we're abusing the brain in the way that we would never abuse the body, because the body would break down earlier, the body would break down more quickly, or more visibly. You would be exhausted, and it's paying attention to the brain and what that that is in the same way as your body is an instrument that needs rest and it needs care. And if you take care of it, then it will give you a lot of service. But if you just keep pushing it in one direction, the same way as you did, if you'd done physical therapy constantly for a month way back in the beginning of that, you wouldn't have been able to do it anyway. But you would have broken down.
Yeah. Yeah, and I watch people do that because, it's funny. They group you up with other people that have the same kind of problems. I guess they think that's going to help, or I don't know, it's easier for them to take care of you. But I saw some people that just some people just gave up, and other people just like, that's it, I'm gonna beat this, and they about destroyed themselves trying to overcome it.
Yeah. That's interesting. We're sometimes our own worst enemies, but in a lot of ways, this is what this is all about.
Yeah.
This whole podcast.
Well, exactly.
Stop being your
and I
own worst
love that there
enemy.
are all these high achievers out there, and these people with, great positive expectations for what they can accomplish in the world. Great. Now, and there's other folks here too that I know they're like, you know what? I'm gonna just motor along and do what I do, and if I change the world, great, and if I don't, I don't. That's fine. But we want to help you be better too. We want you to help be more satisfied with your career and with your accomplishments. So, it's a great opportunity, and we don't want to see anybody burn out. It's no fun. But if you have to experience it, we want to help you get through it.
Yeah, listen to Ken's tips and the show notes on this on bitesizebio.com/the happy scientist, episode 43, I think this is, and you will get a list of what are the symptoms of burnout, the ones that Ken described there, and then some of the things that you can do about it. But the general rule of thumb is just go in the opposite direction of what is burning you out. Slow down, look after yourself, take time out, inject some enjoyment. Well, not inject some enjoyment in your life. That sounds like something different. But put some enjoyment into your life, and so on.
Supplement yourself with enjoyment.
Exactly. I don't want to put as bad as telling someone to drink at the bench, but there you go. That's another thing.
Did I do that?
Briefly, you did. Briefly. Okay, so that takes us to the end of yet another amazing episode, and that was a meaty one, and one that I think that a lot of people will find beneficial. Again, you might want to, this is probably one of those good episodes to remind you to go back to episodes 1 to 9 if you haven't done so already, or even if you have done so now, if you listened to a few more podcasts, going back to episodes 1 to 9, those foundational principles will potentially they'll look different to you now if you've listened to a few episodes. Either way, consider going back to look at those episodes 1 to 9, and there will be some benefit to you, I think, regardless of what stage you're at here, beginner or you've been with us for a while. And the only other thing to mention is to come and visit us at facebook.com/the Happy Scientist Club. Like the page rather, and you will get you'll be kept in the loop about new episodes and the other things that are going on. So again, Ken, thank you for a great episode, and stay in healthy shape, and we'll see you again next time.
The Happy Scientist is brought to you by Bitesize Bio, your mentor in the lab. Bitesize Bio features thousands of articles and webinars contributed by hundreds of PhD scientists and scientific companies who freely offer their hard-won wisdom and solutions to the Bitesize Bio community.